All right, guys, recording this one day early, pre-recorded due to a conflict that will prevent us from doing our normal live stream time tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific. Another big week for crypto. It's been a very, very solid, I'd call it about 3 week stretch now, ever since the bottom happened right around April 10th or 11th, depending on what asset you look at. The tariff fears were, some call it overblown now. Some call it appropriate, and we're climbing back up in spite of some conditions that should still hurt the economy. It's a mixed bag right now. Bulls and bears are very vocal right now, but the bears have become a lot more silent after Bitcoin recovered all the way above 96K. It's actually above 97K, I should say. Currently at about 97.1 with a nice solid 3.6% increase. But as you can see, there were several much larger stories. Ethereum actually up 4.1%, seeing a nice recovery. Anytime Ethereum outpaces Bitcoin, it's somewhat of a big deal because that's been so rare over the past 3-ish years or so, ever since the 2022 correction. But Ethereum, if it can regain that $2,000 mark, which is a big psychological support level for a lot of traders, I think that could go a long way in potentially getting the number 2 market cap asset back on people's radars and getting it a little more respect compared to the many other top caps that have all seen their time in the sun. Other big weeks, SWI with a 17% gain, Hyperliquid up 12.5%, Verum up 23%, Monero up 21%. Early part of the week, it went on a huge run. I won't get into the reasons, but there were some debates going on about its pump and the artificial nature of it. But, that's crypto in general. Many, if not the majority of pumps we see are artificial to some extent. It's only the long-term ones that you can argue are a reflection of mass adoption. BitTensor, another 8% gain, Aave 7. Trump, a big story, obviously his offer to have the top 200 holders, the people who hold the highest quantity of Trump, would get to come to the White House and meet him in person, have a dinner. Mantle up 5.5% as well. So big stories, lots of pretty sizable gains. There were some losers. Hex had a huge drop, Uniswap, PulseX here as well, Shiba Bitcoin, Avalanche dropped 5%. That's somewhat of a surprise. And Cardano actually down over the past week, down about 1.3%, another modest surprise. But overall, as you can see, the market cap over the past week is up 5.1%, sitting at about 3.8, almost $3.81 trillion now. And the volume, when covering for the 4,000 plus assets that we have on our data screener, up 15.7% and at about 401.6 billion over the past week. Social volume wise, we can see Bitcoin up about 4%, pretty even. Ethereum actually down. So like I said, if it gets above that 2,000 range, expect Ethereum social volume to really start to pick up again, especially if it gets there without the help, or normal amount of help, I should say, that Bitcoin needs to provide for Ethereum to get lifted, as it's been the last couple of years. We can also see XRP having a big social volume jump. USD coin, big jump in discussions. Dogecoin, big discussions as people are talking about the ETFs and the potential of NASDAQ listing that 21 shares ETP in the near future. Staked Ethereum, SWI, I won't go through all of them, but you can see, especially on the tail end here, tons and tons of big spikes in social volume as a lot of the altcoiners and meme coiners out there are becoming much more active. Now, we also put out a poll yesterday. We asked, Bitcoin's average market value currently rests just above 94.5. Obviously, it's up significantly at 97.1K since yesterday, but the question still remains. When do you anticipate it will breach 100K once again? 55% of you, 55.5%, said between now and the end of May. That's a pretty long time frame between now and the end of the month, 30 days. Below that, June through December. So if you take these two together, June through December being 27.5%, you're talking at about 83% of all voters think it'll happen by the end of the year. And then a much smaller percent thinks it'll be 2026 or later or never. Now, if we put this poll out, let's say 3 weeks ago, when Bitcoin was struggling to get back over 80K, I think the results would have been much different. But obviously, mathematically, we're a lot closer to 100K. Plus, people's moods, their overall sentiment toward crypto, as is usually the case, has flipped back bullish after some bullish action has happened in the markets. So not a big surprise to see this. I wasn't sure if we'd see like 2/3 of all votes coming in between now and the end of May, but based on where we're at now, there's a pretty good chance that these bullish traders or bullish expectants should be correct. Moving on, I also wanted to point out the Bitcoin inflows and outflows. So we did see, let me make sure this is refreshed. There could be one more day. Okay. So we went through a stretch as we really started to rally here. We were at 84K on April 16th. And then the next 8, I should say, trading days in the stock market, so excluding weekends, we saw inflows on each of those days. I can't remember. I think it was in the $2 to $3 billion range in terms of net inflows for these 8 days combined. And then finally yesterday, this says April 29th, but it's only because of my time zone. It was actually the 30th. So the day before this recording, we finally saw an outflow of about $56.3 million. You can see it's really not much, though, in the grand scheme of things, and doesn't put much of a dent into the massive amount of inflows that undoubtedly powered this rally that we've been seeing. We can technically say that the lowest we got, or the lowest close we got, was way back on April 8th, and we were already starting to rise. And it was kind of like the institutionals FOMO'd in a bit themselves once they saw this small dip on the 15th and we got back below 84K. And they said, all right, it's time. And they pushed up prices along with some of the on-chain whales, which we'll look at shortly. And here we are now back on the brink of 100K. We can also check out volume, which isn't quite as impressive. Now, of course, volume doesn't necessarily reflect anything like how much money is being moved in and out. That's what the inflows and outflows are for. But what it at least shows is the overall enthusiasm toward trading. And in spite of the massive volatility, especially at the beginning of the month, it really didn't cause a ton of volume spikes the same way that, for example, on-chain transaction volume happened for Bitcoin and many other altcoins out there. So, a little surprising to see that the ETF volume is so down, but, I think in general, institutionals are the ones that aren't pouring in money, as we saw from the inflows. There's kind of a holding pattern going on with them. There's a lot of sitting and waiting for what the next tariff news is going to be, any China or US retaliation that could come roaring back, what Jerome Powell is going to do at the next FOMC meeting after getting a lot of pressure from Trump to cut interest rates. It should be very interesting. But for now, trading volume is quite down. And remember that trading volume on the ETF side is much more heavily weighted toward institutions that want exposure to crypto without owning crypto. I also wanted to look at the World Liberty Financial Wallet just to see if there was anything new. This is a price line, so I can remove that. These are the top 4 coins held by the World Liberty Financial Wallet, which is, of course, associated by Trump. And the reason it's useful is because it really shows their expectations. It's almost like an insider trading graph, if you will, because if they're suddenly moving money way in or way out, probably a sign that they're expecting something good or bad to happen to crypto in the near future. But the last big move we saw was really on the 3rd, somewhere between April 2nd and 3rd, when they just added in $25 million more of USD coin. And that's actually declined just a little bit. They haven't really used it for anything of significance because the Ethereum balance has stayed the same for the last almost 2 months. And also the wrapped Bitcoin. I'll just show you that. And then the staked Ethereum as well. I went down about 10 or 15 assets and none of them have changed. The 10 to 15 largest non-stable coins on this address. So it's a sign that they're kind of just holding and waiting right now. Very small uptick, it looks like. Oh, that's just price. Yeah, so in short, the USD coin is still just sitting and waiting to be used. I'll be very interested to see if USDC and something like Ethereum gets swapped and Ethereum's balance goes way up in this wallet. That would be a very good sign. But let's wait and see. Right now, because of the price upticks, they're back over $81 million in holdings, and they were in the low 70s when I was checking it toward the beginning of the month. So they've come up just due to markets rising a little bit, but not much of a change there. I'm going to continue to monitor this wallet very closely because I think it's a very good reflection of, any upcoming policies that they might have in mind for crypto. And so far, nothing of note, which is probably a good thing. All right, moving on to some sentiment stuff. So Bitcoin's positive versus negative commentary across social media, when we just divide all the bullish comments by all of the bearish comments and see how high we're getting. We actually got super high right at the end of last week, April 23rd. I should say, that was a Wednesday, so middle of last week. And right after that, as predicted, as is usually the case, I should say, we saw a short-term drop. Sentiment dropped back down to neutral. I can roughly draw a line. Roughly like right there is about maybe even a little bit lower. If it gets above this line, these gold bars, that's a sign that they're overly bullish. If they are below right around here or so, that's a sign they're getting very bearish. So bullish sign here, prices declined very briefly. Bullish sign here, prices decline. Another top here, prices decline. Then we finally get a little bearish here on the 27th. And after a little bit more of this volatile action, we ended up rising. And we're still kind of in neutral range, getting close to that bullish range, which we don't want to see because they're so associated with tops, as we can clearly paint. But for now, we're okay. And we'll see as the week caps off here whether there's one final push. Bitcoin may move toward 100K, very close to it. And you'll undoubtedly see a lot of FOMO pouring in if that happens today. If it's more of a gradual long-term thing, then we may not. Another thing on the sentiment side, check this out. So blue bars here are low price predictions, anywhere between 10K to 69K Bitcoin. Red bars are anywhere between 100K all the way up to 159K. Plus we included the 250K mark just because there's a lot of discussion around that price prediction for whatever reason. Look at just over the past, 36 hours or so, I should say 12 hours or so, because these are 4-hour bars. The red has really started to overtake the blue, especially right now. This would be a top signal. It doesn't mean it's going to be a long-term one, but almost always, when you see a big red bar dwarfing the blue like this, like we saw here, or even here, it leads to some short-term tops until the crowd gets a little bit humbled and starts to doubt themselves, take profit, sell at a loss, whatever they do. We need retail to feel a little bit of fear or pain. And this shows that there's very little of that right now. There's a lot of people calling for 100K plus. When's it going to happen? What's your target sell price? So on and so forth. So not ideal if you're bullish right now. The crowd may be a little bit too frothy at the mouth for gains and for Bitcoin to keep going up the way it has been for the last couple of weeks. I also wanted to note the higher or above versus lower or below lines here. Kind of the same story. Right around here was the neutral point where blue and red were neck and neck, and then red started to really overtake it. Maybe a 4-to-3 ratio here, maybe even 5-to-3 ratio of higher versus lower calls. That's another sign that there's a lot of FOMO right now. You can see the last time we saw the reds really dwarfing the blues were right here, and it kind of continued all the way down until people finally started predicting lower prices. Oh, and what do you know? We start to bounce. So that's how powerful these social queries can really be. And we continue to try to check on these daily. Moving on to whales and retail traders, I should say. So we've got 3 lines here. We've got the 10 plus BTC line, which has just continued to move up since early March. It's kind of just a broad view of how the largest wallets in Bitcoin are behaving and how they're continuing to climb, which is usually the case. More specifically, we like to look at the 10 to 10K line. Let me make sure this is refreshed. Pardon me. There we go. So no change to the bright green line, but the 10 to 10K line has been quite interesting. You can see how it's really rallied all the way beginning in March, semi-late March, had a slight dip after the tariffs were announced. This was the exact day that it happened, April 2nd. And then it really started to take off. A little bit of uncertainty during that first week with all of the misinformation coming out about the tariffs, or true information, depending on who you want to ask. And then we just saw them really accumulate hard here since April 7th up to this peak on April 24th. They had added 67,217 Bitcoin, which is a ton. That's almost like 3,500 Bitcoin per day, which is crazy. If they're accumulating over 1,000 Bitcoin per day, it's a really good sign that they're bullish and price performance is likely to be bullish. But surprisingly, even though we've been pushing up, I'm a little concerned by the fact that the 24th through the 30th here, these past 6 full days, have been down. They've actually dumped around 15,875 Bitcoin in 6 days. That's, call it 2,000-ish, 2,500-ish Bitcoin per day. So they're definitely taking profit. And if you want to make an argument for bearish performance in early May, this is a fair bearish divergence that's showing right here, even though it's kind of short term. And you can see how accurate this darker green line has been with the green bars representing each daily close. They went down here from mid-February through mid-March. Then they started to flatline and go up as prices did. Then they flatlined again and dropped and prices went down. I mean, there's so many good examples. I know it's not perfect by any means, but we like to combine analysis of these lines with the social sentiment on the retail side, because the retail is a great counter indicator. And speaking of retail, if we look at wallets that hold 0.1 Bitcoin or less, we can see they've actually been moving down pretty significantly all the way since mid-March. That's actually a very bullish sign. We are definitely seeing that retail, especially the small retail, is taking a lot of profit on this rise. They're non-believers. I know that sentiment is showing that there's calls for higher, but at least in terms of them putting their money where their mouth is, they're dumping more than they are accumulating right now. So it's kind of like the vocal minority that's calling for a lot of higher prices. But if you go into the on-chain side of things, you're seeing that their collective holdings are going down over time. So that's quite interesting to see. A few other things on this template while we're here. Supply and exchanges is just continuing to plummet. That's long-term a very good sign. Doesn't really mean anything for the short or midterm. This is a very long-term indicator because it's simply showing whether there's the risk of some future sell-offs coming up. And obviously, the lower we get, the less Bitcoin that's sitting on exchanges, the more people are content with hodling and not selling their coins, because for the most part, I know there's exceptions, you need to move your coins to exchanges to sell. So we're way down here at about 7.2% of all Bitcoin on exchanges. We'd have to go way back in time here to right around December, December 2017, the last time we saw such a low ratio of Bitcoin supply on exchanges. Some on-chain, further on-chain analysis on Bitcoin. Let's go back 3 months here. Make these daily. Okay, so transaction volume, pretty much business as usual, fluctuating up and down, and takes, much less precedent on weekends. Going down to active addresses, I'm just using 30-day moving averages because it's just much less noisy and easier for analysis. Active addresses are continuing to drop pretty steadily. Circulation is moving up, which is a good sign. So the amount of unique tokens moving from wallet to wallet on a daily basis is climbing fast, but network growth, just like active addresses, is dropping. So less new wallets being created on a daily basis compared to what we were seeing at the beginning of the month. A pretty significant drop, I should say. So utility is struggling a bit. And that's a sign that, there's kind of a hodling mentality right now. Now, this is a bit of a bearish sign. 30-day MVRV, it's way up at about plus 9.3%. That means any wallets that have been active over the past 30 days, their combined returns are sitting at about plus 9.3%. Makes sense. We've been on a pretty big pump over the past couple of weeks, but ever since we dropped here at the beginning of the month, it's been less than 30 days, but we're still just seeing a huge reversal in MVRV. And the higher above zero we get with that line, especially if it gets above 10, 15%, it starts to get into a pretty big danger zone. If I go just a little further back, 6 months. Yeah, so sitting at about 9.3%, it's kind of matching what we saw on April 22nd, where it was at 10.8. Other than this little blip right here, the end of 2024 was when we were in that range and we were getting pretty toppy there. And then, of course, this was the all-time high for Bitcoin. We got above 109K, and the MVRV was right at plus 11%. So we're pretty much right below that right now. Keep in mind that when we're getting to this range, I'll mark right around 10% here. When we're at above that range for either line, it's a concern. You can see the blue line representing the 365-day MVRV. It was well above it in late December, as well as the all-time high in mid-January. So this would have been a pretty ideal take profit spot, because on the day of the all-time high, January 19th, MVRVs were both well into double digits, and you want to find entry points here when we're in negative range. So mid to high end danger zone starting to form on the MVRV could be at least a short-term top signal. Funding rates, I also want to mention that Binance was showing a few shorts, but they've mostly dissipated now. BitMEX, kind of the same thing. They're pretty much neutral right now. You can see the total open interest has risen to about almost $29 billion now, after sitting at just $19.9 billion about 3 weeks ago. So pretty big reversal there. And we don't want open interest to get too high. It kind of is a reflection of people being willing to gamble more and being interested in leverage trading, margins, things that can make them short-term money very quickly, which is not ideal for the current market conditions. Again, I'm mentioning a lot of bearish signals right now. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to top like right after this video publishes. And of course, we don't give trading advice. We're simply looking at these metrics under the impression that history has shown us in these conditions that these things have happened in the past. So there's just a lot of warning signals right now, and I'm going to leave it there. Anything can change, China and the U.S. can come to an agreement. The U.S. and the world can come to an agreement, and tariffs can be much less of a thing going forward, just as Trump wants. But for now, and I don't want to get into the politics because I know there's some debate about what the U.S. actually wants right now. And even as a U.S. citizen, I'm not fully aware. But I will say, based on what we know now about the geopolitical news and the macroeconomic and the on-chain and the social end of things for crypto, there's some familiar warning signals that we were seeing right around mid-January that would lead us to advise caution about not getting too greedy at these levels, because the rest of the crowd is already showing the greed that you should not be showing. You want to be going against what the crowd is doing at most junctures. Okay. I also, while I mentioned greed, I wanted to show the level of Memecoin discussions. This graph here, and we'll just go last week. That's fine. We'll make these 30 minutes. So this pink line is showing the social dominance of the top 6 meme coins by market cap. They were getting about 1.8% of discussions a week ago. Now they're getting 5.3% because meme coins have been going off. It's been a very good altcoin, I guess, couple of weeks, actually. And in the meantime, Bitcoin is getting less social dominance after peaking on April 27th. Even layer 2s are going down as well. So this is another reflection that greed is very prominent right now. People are getting back into gambling. Meme coins are being dusted off, and you're seeing the launches and introductions of all these new ones once again. And that's usually a sign that grifters are active again, and people are willing to throw their profit money around and see what sticks, and more willing to just dabble in coins that they've never heard of or provide little to no innovation or unique properties to the cryptocurrency sector. Okay, I also got a couple asset requests, and I wanted to make sure to hit on both of them. One was UniSwap, and it did actually see, let me make sure that's refreshed here. It saw a big spike here during the week of April 23rd. I'll make it daily so we get a better look. Yeah, so there was a sign that there might be a reversal after this long dump here that started all the way back at about 4 or 5 months ago, early December, and prices have dropped 71%. Yeah, so Uniswap holders have been just crushed. But we did see some of the biggest transaction volume spikes we've seen in a long time at the end of the month. That could be a good sign of a reversal. We can also see that circulation, let me unhide the actual bars here. Yeah, circulation had the same kind of spikes on the same day. Active addresses. Yeah, slight climb, not quite at the same significance as circulation. Network growth, pretty big spike there. So for whatever reason, Uniswap's network is starting to come alive again. And we talked about MVRV and the danger of the lines being well above zero. Well, these are actually both well below zero, or at least the blue is way below at negative 41% for 365-day average traders. And then it's only at negative 1.4% for 30-day average traders. Pretty good sign that you're in a arguably a good entry point range here if you do believe in the long term of Uniswap. 30-day has been a little bit lower, so like we're not nearly as good as we were when tariffs were really going crazy around April 7th or 8th. But I still like that they're both in the negative range, so good sign there for Uniswap. Also, we're seeing not too much shorting. There was a little bit, but it's kind of gone away. We're mostly neutral now. Total open interest is climbing just a tiny bit, but not enough to be notable. And then check out this whale transaction spike. We did see a big jump in $1 million or more transfers on April 24th. And interestingly, it didn't really result in much. In fact, prices kind of went back down up until today, where we're seeing a minor spike in price. So let's check it out by tier really quick. We'll look at the overall price, which is at about $5.40. So the whales are going to be in the range of probably 1 million or more, but we'll include the sharks too. I'm just going to take a rough look at 100K or more wallets to see what their percentage of holdings are, and they're actually dropping a bit. That's a bit of a surprise. We'll do it by absolute. We'll do it by absolute here. Yeah, so I'll just highlight this by itself. The whales holding 1 million or more have been dropping pretty substantially. These whale spikes up here look like they were profit taking based on what I'm seeing here. Because right around the 24th, we see kind of a drop afterwards, right around the 27th, 28th. Let me full screen it so we can see it better. If we just go back 1 month, since April 1st, oh, I gotta hold shift, that's why. They've dropped just about 10 million UniSwap here. That's a big drop. I'd be concerned about that. It doesn't look like the key stakeholders for UniSwap are moving in the direction that bulls would want them to. Mean dollar invested age, a little bit of dormant movement with all of these whale transactions, but nothing quite as significant as this, which would indicate we might be seeing a reversal. Supply and exchanges starting to move back up, also a bit of a concern. RSI is about average. Total amount of holders has been moving up a little bit with the resurgence in network growth. But yeah, I think overall, I don't see enough here to be confident that UniSwap is going to, suddenly have a big party like it's 2021 again for DeFi. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that for you. And if there are any big anomalies, you'll of course see it on our insights page or our social media. The other one mentioned was Ethereum name service. If we look at transaction volume, it's pretty non-existent. It's been struggling to stay afloat as of late, with only about 26 million, anywhere between 26 to $40 million or so in on-chain transaction volume over the past per week over the last couple of weeks. Active addresses really slumping, circulation and network growth also slumping. So this network looks to be quite not dead, but dormant compared to how it usually is. MVRVs seem to be off the axis for whatever reason. Yeah, they're skewed for whatever reason, so we can't really do the analysis on average trading returns, unfortunately. Open interest, we're starting to see a little bit of a climb, but you can see compared to, late November, it's pretty non-existent. We had $211 million back in late November when prices were spiking and everyone wanted to get in on the FOMO. And now we're literally at 10% of that, at about $21 to $27 million in total open interest. Whale transactions also quite non-existent, staying quite dormant at the moment. ENS, if we can check out the key stakeholders with the price at about $18 or so, we'll look at, again, million or more coins as a good baseline. Make this a different color. That's actually not looking too bad. The million or more ENS holders are on the rise, at least in terms of tokens. It could be due to minting, though. I'm not familiar enough with ENS and its processes. No, that's legitimate. It's the overall percentage of supply that's moving up along with it. If we go back in time a little bit, Yeah, I mean, they've been moving up pretty consistently for the last 6 months or so. So that's actually not a bad sign. I don't think ENS is going anywhere, even though the altcoin has been rather stagnant in terms of on-chain activity for a while now. RSI is actually a little concerning due to this 2-week jump of about plus 35%, which is pretty significant, bigger than I thought. And last but not least, let's check on the positive versus negative commentary for those two assets, beginning with ENS while we're still here. If I can find, there we go. Let's just go last month. So we're actually seeing a huge positive, not that huge. It's only about 1.2 to 1 in terms of positive versus negative commentary, but this is the highest we've seen in a month. So that's a little concerning. I think there's a little FOMO going on with ENS, and the crowd might be causing a top in the near future. And then on UniSwap, also a very big FOMO spike, even bigger. Yeah, I'd say final conclusion, Uniswap looks concerning due to key stakeholders moving down in terms of their holdings and retail having a massive FOMO spike today, easily the largest we've seen over the past month, almost 12 to 1 positive versus negative commentary. ENS doesn't look quite as bad. It's more just hanging out, and I like that key stakeholders are staying patient and not dumping the way Uniswap key stakeholders are. So that's my assessment of those two. A quick check on trending words, if I can get them loading. Market Insights, Gork. I'm guessing it's a meme coin that is intentionally a misspelling of grok. Forecast, trading, indicators. Looks like there's a big push for education right now, which is what we shine at. So maybe there's some people that are checking out our videos for the first time that are picking up some knowledge on how to analyze markets. But that seems to be what we're seeing at the end of this work week are a lot of people talking about technical indicators, different types of analysis they can use. In terms of trending coins, just to give a quick rundown, we've got the top 2 market cap assets in crypto right at the top. Bitcoin number 1, Ethereum number 2. They're all about price discussions for the most part. Solana here at number 3. And then we have Hype, another top cap in Dogecoin, another larger cap in AVAX, Avalanche, XRP, another top cap. So we're seeing just many of the main OGs here throughout the top 10. Not many meme coins are obscure altcoins. And of course, if you want to find some of the more obscure altcoins in which you're seeing the biggest FOMO, you can find the top gainers over just the past 24 hours here in terms of social dominance, or top losers. I'd actually recommend looking at the losers if you're looking for buy candidates. Of course, sometimes they're skewed by really tiny assets that just never get social dominance, or it's rare. So if you ever see something other than minus 100% here, you might find some pretty good gems. Yeah, and I think that's a wrap, folks. We will end it here. I hope you got some good insights from us this week, whether it was from our social media posts or this video itself. Stay tuned for our Bybit report, which we'll be publishing shortly, our bi-weekly market update. So we'll have more insights there. It's featuring some sentiment analysis about the top cap assets. And yeah, thank you all. Have a happy and safe weekend, and we will talk to you next time.